Question I do have in regard to the budget is, do we still have the money that's set aside to do any type of an economic evaluation about Diablo Canyon? The Nuclear Power Regulatory Agency is going to be holding a meeting not too long from now about the future of Diablo Canyon. And again, I think that we got a little information on that, but the much broader picture of how that would affect the county, I don't know that we've done that. And as far as the schools, things like that, incorporating a lot of things like that into it. So if we still have that money set aside, I would hope that we would look to kind of reevaluate what this would mean if, in fact, it does close down.
Mr. Buckshot, your comment on that?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, the money was allocated as part of the current year budget in 13-14, and it has not been spent. Initially, the board's direction was to set aside the $50,000 to conduct an economic study of what it would of the impact of Diablo Canyon on the region, and Cal Poly had actually done that in conjunction with PG&E. So we utilized that study and looked at that. I'm trying to remember when that was. I believe it was in the fall sometime, about what Diablo means to the broader region in terms of the economy and also the governmental agencies ourselves, schools and otherwise. So we have all of those numbers available. I think the next question is, what would we want to do about any potential closure, and would we want to use some of that money for any type of additional study or work? Now, a few things just to add to that we reviewed then, and we've talked about periodically, as one of the rationales for contributing to the economic strategy that the EBC is leading is to look to diversify our economy and strengthen our economy so that we're not overly reliant on any one industry. Diablo or any other for that matter. So that's been at play. Your board's been a huge contributor, the biggest contributor to that project to move forward. And then the other question is if Diablo were to close at some point in time, what does our emergency management infrastructure look like? Right now, one of the ironies of having a power plant in our backyard is that in some ways we're safer than we would be otherwise because we have a much more robust emergency response system and planning system in place than what counties have comparable to our size who do not have a nuclear power plant in their county. And, that's something that's on our plate that we're going to evaluate over time. We're keeping close tabs on what's occurring in the regulatory framework to get a feel for what's going on with Diablo. So I guess that's a long way to answer your question of, yes, that money is available and it could be used. We might want to have further discussion or direction from your board about specifically what to spend that on.
Thank you, because I think that, I know we have a lot of the numbers that indicate what impact it would have from an employment, from a dollar standpoint, but from a strategic planning position, how are we going to address that if, in fact, it were to happen at some point? So I just like a little bit more clarity in that regard. So thank you.
A good approach. All right. Ms. Arnold.
Do we have any request for public comment on this?
We do have
item?
one.
Okay. I'll reserve my comments for after public
With
comment.
that, we'll open it to the public. David Weissman has submitted a request to speak.
Good morning, supervisors and county staff. David Weissman, Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility. Well, I had planned to say some things, but thankfully, I think Mr. Meacham summed it all up rather succinctly. I could only add to that there are a number of items that should raise the awareness of the board about impending potential loss of Diablo's revenue. This is going to be a very critical year. There are several issues yet to be resolved. I'll just enumerate them briefly. One is the use of once-through cooling, which is still a contentious issue. It has not been determined yet by the State Water Board whether the plant will or will not be allowed to continue to use once-through cooling beyond its intended expiration in 2024. That would impact license renewal. State Water Board has yet to receive the report from their subcommittee on this. That may happen later this year. But as you have seen reported, these are options that could cost anywhere from $8 to $12 billion. And the utility will need to take a serious fiscal look at that. The second thing is this new issue that's emerged of, quote, load following, just we do call it a technically minor issue, but the idea is that Pacific Gas and Electric would like to be able to operate the plant on an up and down basis throughout the day. If they don't need so much electricity at night, ramp it down 50%. This has not been tried in the industry before successfully. It was tried once at the Browns Ferry plant in Tennessee, but after 2 months of the experiment, they realized they were rattling the place to pieces, and they abandoned the effort. That, again, would indicate there could be an economic problem here. There's a reason you ramp down when you're not selling electricity. It's because you can't sell it and make the money on it. And that should be taken into account. And the other, of course, are the ongoing seismic concerns. We do not know what is planned for the announced report they intend to submit, they being Pacific Gas and Electric, at the end of June 2014, but do know that the NRC's seismic evaluation won't be expected until March of 2015. And since the NRC has themselves said they don't expect PG&E to pass that, they will then have until 2018 to reevaluate the seismic footing. And the final comment, which I think was wisely made about the funding of emergency services. At two closed plants now, both San Onofre and the Kewanee in Wisconsin, a new national policy is emerging is that after 17 months, the NRC has decided the threat maintaining the nuclear spent fuel is so diminished that there's no longer a need to support emergency services surrounding the nuclear power plant. And these places, we have Senator Markey of Massachusetts wrote a scathing letter saying this was unacceptable. And this is a highly contentious issue right now. Will OES funding and support go away 17 months after the plant is closed, even though we know the fuel may remain indefinitely? So all of this bears further follow-up of the thoughtful comments of Supervisor Meacham and the forward-looking thinking that that presents. And we thank you for taking that into account during this upcoming budget session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weissman. That was our only request to speak, so I will close it to the public and bring it back to the board. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to follow up on the remarks made by my colleague and by Mr. Weissman on the Diablo issue. Since obviously, since it's in my district, I spent a lot of time focusing on it and meeting with folks throughout. It seems that I would say it's highly unlikely that the NRC would not want to relicense Diablo Canyon. I think that the issue that will probably come up will be one that PG&E has to address based on some of the things that Mr. Weissman brought up on what the regs are going to be on once through cooling at the end of their license, their current license, what the seismic issues might require. So I think essentially it's going to be an economic decision that would unlikely have to shut it down before the end of its current license, which is another 10 years. That said, I think one of the areas that we've all agreed upon, regardless of the future of Diablo or not, is to, this board has been very involved in economic development. It may be a time to look exactly at where we're headed next on economic. The EVC's done a pretty good job. There's more things happening now in our community. Certainly Cal Poly has externalized its efforts in innovation and in entrepreneurship, and so I've always supporting more funding towards economic development, and I do think we have seen both direct and indirect effects of that effort. But it seems to be also time maybe when we want to look at where are we going next as we continue to fund it and maybe increase funding, so that we have some metrics in place as to what we want to see, because it's in everybody's interest, I think, regardless of the issue of Diablo Canyon. It's in PG&E's interest to see a more diverse economy and to see some of the sectors that we have seen very successfully growing to continue, tech sector being one that comes to mind. So, I think it's time to have a discussion on, where we're going next and how that will look for the next few years on economic development. So,
Actually, if I can just add to that, timing's quite good. I'm meeting with some folks from the EBC in about a week and a half to hear from them some proposals for going forward, and I think that could be the genesis of further discussion.
great.